I'll admit that I've gone back and forth with myself on whether to record this particular podcast episode and use the analogy that I've got in today's episode of the Heart Centered Business podcast, because it's about dating. And I'm likening dating to the way that we use social media. And in this current climate of the manosphere going wild and women's rights being rolled back, it feels a bit contentious. Plus, let's not forget Vogue told us all that having a boyfriend is cringe now, which I love. But I wanted to use this analogy because I think it's such a straightforward way to be able to think about social media. And in the conversations I've had inside my programs and with one-on-one clients, it has gone down pretty well. So I will warn you before we dive in that I'm going to be talking about dating. And in particular, I want you to really recognize and ask the question, am I a bad date on social media? And I'll explain that a little further. So this was a Facebook dating analogy that I almost didn't share, but I really want to use this opportunity to plant a seed about how we might use social media a little differently and how we consider the way that we develop our relationship with social media moving forward, particularly at this time of year where we're starting to think about next year and setting our intentions of how we want to show up. So this is not only episode number 488 of the Heart Centered Business podcast, it's also day 3 of Tashmas. And for your gift today, I've got a spectacular prize that you can enter to win. So you'll want to come and check out the show notes of today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/488 so you can grab all the details and the entry instructions. So let's dive into this episode. We're going to unpack how are you as a date when it comes to social media. And in particular, I'm talking about Facebook, but this also would apply to Instagram. Let's dive into it, shall we? Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. As I said in the episode intro, I'm specifically going to be referring to Facebook as the social media platform that you are a bad date for. But this actually applies to any social media platform that you are trying to grow a following on or trying to grow your business on. But I just want to stick to a single platform because it makes some of the examples far more straightforward. And for a lot of people in my audience, Facebook is their primary social media platform. But some of the platform specific stuff, it would apply to Instagram. It would also apply to TikTok. It would apply to YouTube. So feel free to apply this to your chosen platform. But that actually brings me to the first point, which is, are you a bad date for your chosen platform? In this instance, Facebook. Are you a bad date for Facebook? Now, if we think about your interactions with Facebook, your attempts to build a relationship with Facebook as your platform, as your social media platform, when you are choosing your strategy, when you are making a decision about how you're going to grow your business and you're starting to focus on building an audience, as soon as you see that there's one flaw with Facebook, you're looking for another platform. You are looking elsewhere for something that doesn't have that flaw. But what I see people doing is they're still coming back to Facebook here and there or dabbling in Facebook as well as with other platforms. Now, I'm not saying that you should not date multiple people at multiple times, but I want you to be really honest. Are you giving any platform an actual chance of building a relationship with you? Or are you, whenever you're doing stuff on Facebook, you're looking at what all of the other platforms are doing anyway? Whenever you decide you are going to give some time and energy to your Facebook strategy, At the first sign of trouble, you're also hedging your bets with some other platform or some other strategy. So what ends up happening is you end up half doing 16 different strategies across 4 different platforms, but nothing's going anywhere, partly because you're not fully present with any of them. But you end up blaming them for not being the right fit for you, not being good enough, not being effective enough, having problems or challenges. And I see this so consistently. People will ask me, how can I have a business without social media? And you absolutely can. But you still need a strategy to grow your audience. And for most people, social media is the best way of doing that. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to take time and energy to learn what works. It's going to take time and energy for you to build that following, and that takes presence. But as far as growing a business and growing an audience goes, it's still one of the most time and cost-effective ways for you to build an audience in the current market. You know, if you think about back in the 90s, if you wanted to start the business that you have today, you wouldn't have the tools and strategies, and it certainly would not be this simple and straightforward for you to be able to show up online and attract and connect with people who are potential clients. I think a lot of the time, the comparisonitis between different platforms is also based on like a false narrative that, oh, you get so much more reach on Instagram, or you get so much more reach on TikTok, or everyone's on TikTok. And actually, we had a conversation about this in one of my group program calls recently, where it's like, yeah, that was the same when Clubhouse started. Everyone was on Clubhouse and everyone had to be on Clubhouse. And because people hadn't yet potentially nailed their Facebook strategy, or even people who had, they ran over to Clubhouse and almost immediately dumped and neglected their Facebook in favor of this new platform. And then 6 months later, boom, it was gone. And the same thing happened with Periscope. Everyone was saying you need to be on Periscope and it's so much better because of X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, Periscope didn't last either. And in both cases, yes, I experimented with those new platforms, but I never let it have me neglect my primary platform. My primary platform has always been Facebook. So are you a good date for your chosen platform? Are you giving it the time and energy and attention that it deserves and that is needed for you to be able to build that strong symbiotic relationship with that particular platform as well? The second piece of this bad date analogy is when it comes to the algorithm. So if you consider yourself dating the Facebook algorithm, are you actually looking after the algorithm and being a good date for the algorithm? Or are you expecting the algorithm to look after you long term, but you keep trying to trick it? You keep trying to trick it into giving you what you want when you haven't proven yourself to be reliable, when you haven't proven yourself to be consistent, when you haven't proven yourself to even be interesting. You know, ultimately, algorithms are there to ensure that users of that platform are fed more content that is interesting to them, that they're going to engage with. And if you're throwing terrible content, or even worse, AI generated or templated content at your audience and at the algorithm, and expecting them to reward your terribly dismissive behavior and love and adore you long term, like the algorithm is not going to be your friend if you are not a good date for the algorithm. You've got to give it time and energy. You've got to prove yourself as being reliable and consistent and interesting. Otherwise, the algorithm not showing your content to enough people is the algorithm doing its job. And if you had a friend who came to you and said, look, I went on 3 dates with this person, and to be honest, they're just throwing out their same old anecdotes. I can tell they tell the same stories to every single person they talk to. They're not actually interested. They're not reliable. They don't respond to my messages. They disappear for 6 weeks at a time. Would you tell your friend to keep dating that person? Or would you tell your friend, they sound like they're pretty dodgy. I don't know that this is a long-term thing for you. And that's how you are behaving with the algorithm, but you're expecting the algorithm to commit to you long-term. That's a bad date. You're a bad date. Yeah? All right. And then number 3 is in relation to your audience and your customers. If you think of yourself as dating your customers and your audience, you want them to commit to you, right? You want them to buy something from you, but you want them to commit the moment they find you. The moment they find you, you want them to turn into a buyer. And if they don't, you label them as a time waster, as a freebie hunter. You label them as someone who's not high intent. Gross. You label them as someone who's not ready to do the work. And so you start sharing content that says, I only work with people who are ready to do the work. I only work with people who are really deeply committed. Stop following me if you aren't ready to dive in and take this seriously. And you're expecting commitment from your audience from the outset. And it might feel like that passive aggressive or reverse psychology content is really sassy and it's really enticing and it makes you magnetic, but people are so much wiser to that kind of language and messaging these days, just the same way that people are so much wiser to red flags when dating humans these days, because we talk to each other and we share stories and we interpret and interrogate the way that we are being treated and the way that we're being spoken to far more with our friends. And it's the same when it comes to businesses as well. It's the same when it comes to the people that we follow on social media. And so if you're expecting your Facebook audience to commit to you and buy from you from the outset without you having to in any way build a relationship, in any way show what your interests are, demonstrate that you are able to be the kind of provider that can be relied upon, right? Like if you're not willing to do your side and instead you just game people into your funnels and then manipulate them and use agitation to make them feel like they're not good enough. Like the amount of negging content that I see on Facebook these days is wild, and I'm seeing it in email marketing as well. I think a lot of that tends to come from AI supported or AI assisted content creation as well, but also it does come from some of those manipulative, consent bypassing marketing and sales strategies as well. So you're so focused on finding more potential partners, i.e. customers, you give no time or attention to the connections you already have on Facebook unless they prove themselves to you. Does that sound familiar? Like, does that not sound like a bad date? You keep talking about yourself on Facebook and you don't ask questions unless you can relate the answer that they give back to you in your stories. I've definitely been on dates with people like that. And I can tell you I didn't enjoy myself and I didn't want to go back for another date. So are you actually showing up on social media in a way that is building a relationship, that is demonstrating that you are interested in your audience and interested in your potential clients? Or are you showing up on social media in a way that is dismissive, that is forcing them to jump through hoops without actually having any information on whether the hoop is the right thing for them to jump through? And also like talking about yourself all the time. Or are you genuinely interested in your Facebook audience? The other one that I see when it comes to your audience is that you keep telling them what they need and what they should do, and you keep giving them advice, but you're not actually listening to them. And I see this as well. They could tell you what they want and what they've tried, but you just talk over them and you assume that they don't get it if they're not saying the right things and they're not immediately jumping into whatever it is that you're talking about. And you just keep consistently telling your audience that they are wrong. Again, does that sound like the kind of date that you would want to go on? Does that sound like the kind of Facebook account that you would want to follow? But here's the thing, right? You might hear me say all of this and then say, yeah, but like, why should I be continuing to try and build a relationship with a platform that clearly doesn't value me, right? Facebook. I totally understand that. Why should I try and build a long-term relationship with something that gets changed? The algorithm. Why should I build a long-term relationship with people who aren't buying from me? My audience are just freebie chasers. And I'm not saying that you just have to settle and accept that ultimately you're just going to be treated poorly by the algorithms, treated poorly by the platform, treated poorly by that audience. I wouldn't encourage anyone to continue dating if that wasn't something that they felt like it was reciprocated. But what I am saying is you're expecting from your platform, from the algorithm, and from your audience a whole lot. And I don't know whether you've really interrogated how good of a date you are. I don't think you've necessarily given it a red hot go and made the commitment to trying to make it work and being present, being consistent, asking questions. And ultimately, if you carry this same bad date kind of behavior to a new platform, thinking that the new platform is way better, it's making all the promises in the world, if you show up as a bad date there, you're going to get mostly the same. The problem is not the platform. The problem is not the algorithm. And the problem is not your audience. Despite what some of those really gross, pushy marketing and messaging gurus out there might say, stop labeling people who signed up to your mailing list for a free resource as time wasters and freebie chasers when they literally signed up to your mailing list and said, I'm interested in what it is that you do, and they are receiving your emails. They are happy to receive your emails. It's not their job to go out there and hunt down how they can pay you money. It's not their job to do all the heavy lifting. It's not their job to be completely in charge of where you go on your dates and what it is that you end up talking about. That's not their job. And so I wanted to share this one because I do think that when it comes to thinking about it through the lens of the analogy, it just makes it so much more real because we're thinking about your platform as a long-term relationship rather than thinking about your platform as a machine that you put terrible content into and it spits money out for you, because that's not how it works. Similarly, when we think about the algorithm as a long-term relationship that we're building, we show up differently. And same with your audience. When we think about it as potentially this is a long-term relationship, this could become a commitment. You show up to that differently compared to the way that a lot of people speak about their primary social platform, their algorithm, and their audience. All I ask is that before you write off that relationship, you make a decision about whether you're willing to put some time, energy, and presence into giving the dating of that platform, the algorithm, and that audience a real shot, that you're really willing to walk away from what could potentially be a very symbiotic relationship, a very affordable business growth strategy. You're really willing to walk away from all of that without actually having put in some energy to being a good long-term viable partner and doing your part to understand how those things work and to get curious about how you can show up in a way that is going to be of benefit to both sides of that relationship. And ultimately, if you decide Facebook is not the platform for you, I respect that decision. I applaud that decision. But don't come back and dabble here and there and expect to get spectacular results from that random 3 a.m. booty call, because that's the equivalent of what it is when you drop back in here and there and expect instant results and instant commitment and long-term type of return on investment for your time. And if you do decide to move on to a different strategy, a different platform, a different way of growing your business without any social media platform, then whatever it is that you choose to step into doing instead, please pay attention to how you're showing up with that strategy. I would hate for you to find yourself years from now having jumped from platform to platform, from strategy to strategy, never really making that commitment on your end to be a good date, to be curious, to show up fully, to be present, and to be, someone who is actively learning about who it is that you're dating, right? So I would hate for that to be the experience, because for so many people, that is, if they look back, what's been happening for the last 5 years. They're bouncing in and out of different platforms, not really showing up fully on any of them. They have the flash and crash strategy. So they're really present and hyper connected with their audience for 6 weeks while they're launching something. Then they disappear for 2 months. Then they come back conveniently a week before they've got something else to promote, and then they disappear again. And if you can't get excited about dating the platform or the algorithm, at least get excited about your audience and at least get excited about showing up for them. Most of the time when I find myself in a bit of a social media flunk, which, it does happen here and there, whenever I find myself feeling a bit funky about social media, about algorithms, about platforms, and about the people who own those platforms, instead, I focus my energy and attention on the people in my audience who are hungry for me to show up again. I focus on the people who aren't yet in my audience, who are scrolling and scrolling through content on Facebook, hoping to find something that grabs their attention, something that's helpful, someone who might be able to help them. And if I focus on those people, then I show up far more effectively, and I can show up far more consistently as well, because I know that that is what I need to do in order to be seen by the very people I'm trying to reach. Now, if in listening to this podcast episode, you have recognized you're not a bad date at all, you're fine, you're doing a great job, you're showing up, you're, treating the platform well, you're treating the algorithm well, you're looking at building those long-term relationships, that's amazing. If you are feeling like, maybe I am a bad date, maybe I am a little flighty, maybe I am jumping from platform to platform and never really paying attention when I'm with the platform I want to be with, then in today's Tashmas gift, I am actually giving away a free 90-minute social session with me. So we'll get together one-on-one to look at your current social media strategy. Even if you are spread across 4 different platforms or you're not sure what your primary platform is, I can help you to interrogate and analyze what is the best move for you moving forward, which platform I would recommend that you commit to trying to build on first and foremost, which one might be the right fit for your niche, for the style of content that you like to create, for the audience that you're wanting to generate, for the things that light you up the most. There's often a very obvious primary platform to focus on, but also we can address any of your hashtag but tashes about that particular platform. We can ensure that you are able to build on that platform in a really consistent and strategic way. And in that session, we'll have plenty of time to actually develop a content strategy and some specific content for you as well. So if you'd like to enter, all you need to do is find the Day 3 Tashmas post over on my Facebook page and pop your entry in the comments by telling me your number 1 challenge when using social media for your business. Now, I'll have the links to my Facebook page and those detailed instructions with the show notes of today's episode. So if you head to tashcorbin.com/4 488. You'll find all of the links and instructions there. So don't panic about having to remember what it is that you have to say or what you need to answer in order to enter. The best thing to do is just go to the show notes of today's episode. The instructions and the link will be there for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Thank you also for your grace and your understanding in my potentially clunky way of describing inanimate objects as things that you need to date. But hopefully it has made sense and landed in some way. Look, it's not my best work, but ultimately I always like to explore different angles and different avenues of ways that we talk about these things and we conceptualize these things, because I think the more angles and concepts that we use, the more likely we are to find one that really makes sense for us and that really lands for us. So thank you in advance for your forgiveness of my clunkiness with that dating analogy. And I hope it hasn't brought back too many memories of terrible dates that you've been on either. Thank you for joining me for this episode. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. I will see you tomorrow for day 4 of Tashmas. Bye for now.